All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Gas Police Samus from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, aka Game Logic on Twitch. Back with another episode of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast, Grown Ups Who Game. This is episode 166 on the night of the 22nd of October in this year of our gaming, 2020. This is the Gamer Experience Show, part 2 for this month. If you don't know the format, if this is your first time joining in on the podcast, I highly doubt that it is, but maybe, just maybe, it might. We go alternating weeks, so each 1 week we do our Gamer Experience Show, which is our experience and everything that we've been playing. The alternating week we do a deep dive on industry, gaming, news. So you've been so fortunate as to stop by, or maybe unfortunate as to stop by on a week where we're going through our gamer experience. As I have with, that sentence makes no grammatical sense whatsoever. I have with me tonight two of my three co-hosts, two members of the E2KG network, Mr. DBQ Hams and Osiris Prime. How are you doing, DBQ?
I is co-hosting now. So nice to be here. Thank you. No, you don't have to make sense. This is E2KG. We'll make it through and it'll all work out. But no, I'm glad to be here with you fine gentlemen. So thanks for letting me crash this party tonight.
No problem at all. Osiris Prime, how you doing?
Super tired.
Yeah.
Super tired.
We are there, one and the same, brother. But I am going to bed not too long after this podcast, so it will be all good. If you're also, again, not familiar with the format of the show, one of the things that we do during the Gamer Experience Show is we always kick off with a report out on our PickZ PlayZ. The PickZ PlayZ is kind of our homework assignment that we give to each other. It runs for 2 weeks, the 1 week off where we do the deep dive games news show, and then we go another week before we do the other Gamer Experience Show. So the running assignment for the past 2 weeks has been as follows. Many of us have dabbled and sometimes dived into free-to-play games. Fortnite and World of Tanks, World of Warships were frequently mentioned this year on our show. Another show regular, Rocket League, just went free-to-play, and Genshin Impact is grabbing headlines this week. Choose a free-to-play game you haven't tried. How's the onboarding? How many layers of systems or currency are leveling? And do you hit a paywall? So tonight's going to get a little bit interesting because we don't always necessarily execute the homework assignment to the letter of the law. Sometimes we try to meet it in spirit. Osiris Prime, we'll start with you. You played Vigor on Switch. This is a free-to-play game?
Yes. Yeah, on Switch. I think it's on all available systems and consoles. I know it's on Xbox also. I just saw it pop up on my feed. But it's from Bohemia Interactive. And their most well-known games have been the Arma games and DayZ. They got a bunch of other stuff on here I've never heard of. Yeah, free to play. It's kind of battle royale-ish, but also like survival. So you get thrown into first you get kind of just thrown into your own little like area where you can kind of screw around. You got a base that you can kind of build up and decorate how you want it, at least as far as I can tell so far. Yeah, I've upgraded I think twice now so far, and just kind of like the exterior stuff has kind of changed a little bit. I go from like kind of a shack tarpy, with like tarps everywhere. Now I'm starting to get a roof and kind of siding and stuff. So and then you can kind of practice with your guns. You can if whatever you have, you go to like a little shooting range and you can shoot your guns and practice. And there's some mini game-ish to it. So I don't know if you get like a certain score, if you can like get stuff, but there's that. And then there's other areas that I've been able to go kind of run around in, like almost like there's a fishing area and almost like a mine or something, but I haven't seen anything that I can do there. It's just kind of like there, I guess, for aesthetic maybe, or maybe I can do something as I progress. But once you kind of screw around in that little home base area, you can go into, I think there's 5 different maps, and there's 2 that rotate out. I think it was like 3 to 4 hours or so. And you jump in there, and the most I've seen as far as play people in there have been 12. And the maps aren't super huge. It's not nearly as huge as say like a Fortnite or Warzone or anything like that. But they're not too bad. They're like medium, I would say, maybe even a little smaller depending on how they have it laid out. Like the last one I played is kind of just like a corridor of like a street with like houses and buildings on the side of it. Uh, so the objective is not really just to kill everybody. It's just kind of to survive the zone. And there's at least one drop, and I think I saw in one of the very first games, although it might have been kind of a booby trap thing, but there's 2 supply crates basically that fall after about I think it's about 2 or 3 minutes. So you get those 2 or 3 minutes, you can search those buildings, you can get guns and ammo, but you also get materials like metal and wood and stuff like that, so you can take back to your base and upgrade that. But once those supply drops come down, you want to head over to it, and it gives you a crate, which actually gives you sometimes material, but usually gives you like skins and like better weapons and stuff like that. So you can take that back to your base, and get that stuff. But you have to get out of the zone, and there's like, well, I guess depending on the map again, once again, because I think I've seen like 3, but I've seen up to like 5 kind of escape areas, and they're marked with like an X, like kind of like a triangle with an X in the middle of it. If you get to that without getting killed or anything like that, you get your crate. If you die, either from someone shooting you or like say you fall off a cliff or something, then you pretty much lose. You lose the crate for sure, but then you lose some of your stuff, but you don't lose all of it, which is kind of nice. So that's neat. The other thing is, if you die by a person, you actually do lose all your weapons that you're currently carrying, and I believe like some of your like they have like little gadgets and stuff that you can use, like a jammer, so nobody can see you like on the mini map, or a decoy thing that kind of shoots like every few seconds, so it kind of makes a blip on somebody's map or compass when they're looking around. Um, and then also once that crate falls, I think you get like, I don't know, maybe like a minute. I haven't really like timed it, but after that minute, there's like this radiation that comes into play, and that's when you have to like run to one of those escape room or escape exits. So it's pretty neat. I've been actually playing it quite a bit this past couple weeks. Graphics are pretty decent. Nothing like super. I mean, I'm playing on the Switch, but I assume if I played on the Xbox, which I haven't yet, it'd probably look a lot better. But it's actually not too bad on the Switch. There's a lot of fog on the Switch. That old what was it, N64, I think, was where they used to use a lot of fog to kind of like play up the graphics there. But it's not too bad. It's not too bad. And then the gunplay, it's all third person, which I'm not usually the best in, but I've actually been doing pretty good in this one. The movement's not like super like twitchy, so that's kind of, I think that kind of helps me a lot. But yeah, but I've been having a pretty good time with it. As
So,
far as like, okay, go ahead.
so do you play this in teams, or is it always just you by yourself?
You can do teams. I haven't done that yet, and I'm
Okay.
not sure if you have to have somebody in your party to go into like a um, team game mode or not. I haven't really seen like um, anything in the menus where I can pick like a team match, because I know there is teams, because you can. I think it was when I was reading up on it, it said you can play in like in a party and play as a team. So, but I haven't seen that yet though.
So is it? I mean, does it have solos, duos?
So far, just solos, as far as I can tell.
Okay. So it doesn't
Yeah.
really have. I mean, it says it has multiple modes, but it doesn't really say you can enjoy multiple
Yeah.
different game modes, such as shootout or elimination. So did you play any of the other modes, or is the base mode elimination?
Yeah, the base mode is just like a battle royal, basically, just
Okay.
with a lot less people. Yeah.
Okay. With a lot less people. Okay.
Yeah,
I
like I
might say
said, I think there's only like 12 people, like at the max that I've seen, and that's on the Switch. Maybe it's more on the Xbox. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think there's crossplay as far as I read up on it. So
yeah. Now it's
it's
what's quirky about this is it's only console. So it's on all the consoles, but it's only
okay. So
console.
it's not on
It
PC.
is not
Oh,
on
okay,
PC as far as I can tell.
that's
And
interesting.
it's fairly new. It just came out last fall, first on the Xbox One, and then I just hit. Well, it's not even on PlayStation yet. So right now it's just Xbox and Nintendo. It's supposed to
Yeah,
hit the PlayStation boxes later this fall.
yeah. Like when I mentioned it, I think it was the last GX show, maybe. Like I was just like on some forum somewhere looking at like free to play games on the Switch, and that one came up. So I was like, oh, that's
Huh.
I never saw this before. It's probably because it just came out, most more than likely. But yeah, it's pretty interesting actually.
I mean, it says it was coded in Unreal Engine. So how are the? I hate to sound like a fanboy, but how are the graphics?
Yeah, it's not like I said, it's not the prettiest of games,
Okay.
but it's pretty decent. I mean, for the Switch, because like I said, I haven't played it on Xbox yet, and that it just came. I just noticed it on the Xbox. Well, I think like at the end of last week, but I didn't get a chance to try it out yet. But yeah, it looks pretty decent. I mean, it's not everything. I think what happened in the world, there's like some kind of nuclear war or some kind of bomb dropped somewhere. Because there's always this, like I said, there's like a radiation that starts to come into play. And just kind of the way the world looks, it's like there's like hazard signs everywhere and stuff like that. So it's just I'm assuming that's what happened. I didn't really see any story stuff really too much. So
Yeah, no,
they
no,
kind of just drop you in the world.
it's this post-apocalyptic Norway, which for those of you who are big Tom Clancy readers or Cold War kids, was Norway. Was predicted to be was always kind of war gamed as one of the principal areas of contestation that the Soviet Union would want to take because it gives you that seaboard out into the Atlantic. So
Hmm.
no, it's very interesting. Yeah, I might give it. I like the fact that you would be on console and wouldn't be with a bunch of sweaty PC players running around with keyboard and mouse. So
Yeah, that's probably why I'm doing so well with the gunplay. So I'm playing other. It's for sure other consoles now that I know, and
yeah,
it might even be just like other Switch players. So
right, right. And
yeah,
even that gives you advantage if you're running around with your Pro controller in comparison to everybody else who's on their Joy-Con. So
yeah, and I usually try to play Pro Controller if I'm
is
playing
this
a game like that.
free to play?
Yes, free to play. Yep.
Okay,
And of course, they have like any other game nowadays. They have their battle pass, but there's a free tier too that you get. So
right.
and there's as far as I can tell, there's only the one currency that you can. You do get some of it in game. That's another thing. You get some currency from the supply drops that come out. So I mean, you can always save up stuff and save up your money to buy stuff if you wanted to. But you get stuff from the free tier of the battle pass also. So
Okay, it
which is
looks
kind
like
of nice, kind of like Spellbreak too.
yeah, it
Which
looks sorry, it looks like it's out of early release, so it's full. I mean, out of early access, so it's fully released.
yeah,
That's pretty dope. I will relinquish the floor to you, DBQ, because I see you chomping at the bit to ask the questions that you specifically asked in your homework assignment.
No, that's okay. I mean, what I'm looking at here is you spent a whole lot of time actually playing this game, and that's great. Um, I uh, I learned a lot more about what this game is. I had never heard of it before. When you had first
yeah,
posted it in the thread, I asked that question of what was this? So to hear what it is and to see that it's not just simply kind of a cut and paste of another genre that they're trying to put a little bit of a different spin on it is pretty fun. So so yes, I will ask the assignment, but so is it just mainly cosmetics then in terms of the store? What's the revenue model for this game then?
yeah. It's just as far as I can tell so far, it's just skins for your gun or for your person. Or well, I shouldn't say skins for your person, but clothing like you get gloves and hats and scarves, shirts, and all that kind of stuff. I haven't seen like special guns or anything as far as I can tell in the battle pass because you can flip through the battle pass so you can see what you're getting, but it's just
So the
cosmetics so
battle
far.
pass kind of the standard $10 type of
Yeah,
yeah.
$10, and then you can buy the in-game currency if you want, but like I said, you can earn it during the game too. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's why I kind of liked it so much because it's not just I have to kill everybody, wipe everybody. I can actually just if I want to go to there's been a couple times where I've seen the supply drop come down and I've just kind of waited for people to come through, and I'll just pick them off. There's other times where I'll rush to it because I'm like right by it, and grab it and kind of just run away so I can get to one of the exits. So that's actually kind of nice. And then there's other things like what do they call 'em? Communication stations. There's usually like three to five in a map. And if you get to one of those, and there's like a little radio you can interact with, and it gives you different options like, hey, I want the supply drop to drop over here so you can, try to get it as close to you as you can. Or you can say, hey, I don't want anybody else on the map to see where it's actually going to drop. So only I can see that. So it's kind of interesting. And then there's other kind of just, hey, turn off radar so nobody can see anything or just other things like that. So it's kind of cool. Very interesting.
Nice. Great.
So
That's good.
So can you talk a little bit? I mean, the specific question from the assignment was how many layers of systems or currency are leveling. So specific to currency, obviously one of our biggest problems when we play these free-to-play games is the ones that have like 8 different forms of currency, and some of them just don't make any sense. And you have like you have thousands of units of a thing, and then like 6 months later, you're like, what the heck am I supposed to use this for?
Yeah, there's only the one, just the one. I don't know, coins or gold, but they don't really say what it is. But it's only the one so far, as I can see, which is nice. Yeah, because there's been other ones where there's like, it's just frustrating, just trying to figure out, excuse me, what you can buy with this kind of currency or that kind of currency. But yeah, it's just the one kind of gold coins that they kind of show in the game, so that's nice. Leveling. See, I've played it for what, probably 2 or 3 weeks now. I think I'm around 10 to 12, I believe, on the level so far. I've slowed down a little bit this week just because I've been a little bit busier, but so it's you level up fairly quickly. So I mean, obviously that early level, you usually kind of jump up pretty quickly, especially now that I've been playing these kind of games more regularly. So, but yeah, leveling's I think just kind of on par with everything else. And so far, I haven't hit any kind of paywall. Oh, I guess this is kind of one. This is kind of one thing. So at the beginning of each match, you can pay some of the money, some of your coins. I think it's like 30 or 60. So you can either get more resources, like when you're kind of looting around like the houses and stuff, but you have to pay to get that, that extra amount of materials or stuff. Or you can say, hey, I want a better crate, or I want better items out of a crate, if I'm able to get the crate and escape with it. So, and then you pay, I think that's like 60 coins you pay to get a better crate. So that's one thing. So I guess that could kind of get in the way. But I mean, like I said, I haven't seen any kind of like extra weapons or anything in the battle pass so far. So I don't. It's just
Huh?
cosmetics.
Does that kind of sound like pay to win to you, DBQ? It sounds dangerously.
It's close, but
Yeah,
because there's no weapons
there's
in
a
there. I don't. I think
fine line
it's
there, but not to the same effect that I would be thinking of.
Okay.
yeah. That is a weird piece that I saw when I first started playing, because I could see like the coins like pop up for the other people. I'm like, what is that? What are they doing? And then
Right.
I was just, oh, it's just extra material and stuff. So, but I don't know, like if you build up your base like it's like to the point where it's like super great, or I don't know how many levels to that there is, but if at a certain point, like say, hey, like all these materials, or maybe I only got like a certain amount of materials, not as much as like when I started, or I don't have to have like, I don't know, like instead of like 100 metal, I only have to have maybe 20 metal to make a certain gun, because you can craft guns too when you get the blueprints or the plans, I think they call them in the game. So I guess that could be
It sounds
kind of dangerous.
like an indirect pay to win that could. I mean, for some people, it's not going to be effective because they're not that good a player. But it seems like eventually at some point when there's like a very experienced, very high skill player like who does that like it is directly a pay to win, right? Because it gives them a head start essentially. Or
Yeah, and
uh,
there has been times where I've killed people, and you can take their stuff, take their weapons, and I didn't have that weapon. Like I didn't have the plan for the weapon, but now I have the weapon itself. So unless I die, I'm uh, I could keep using that weapon. I can keep using that weapon until I get the plans, and then I can just make it. But I'm kind of careful with that. I have noticed with that part of it where I like, oh, I got like a look like an AK or something. They call it something different, and I put that in my inventory because I didn't want to lose it, because I didn't have the plans for it yet. So I mean, I guess, but the fact is, I killed that person with that AK. Uh, so I guess that could happen. Like I said, I don't know if that's for sure that what's happened when you update your base. I mean, that could be possible that stuff gets less expensive and stuff like that. So
yeah, it sounds like
I'll find out.
it sounds kind of like the same thing in Call of Duty, right? Where you have you have weapons and a certain number of unlocks, but if you kill a higher level player, then you can take their weapon, and their weapon is probably has more stuff than yours does. So
Yeah, more attachments and stuff.
I don't know. Anything else you want to ask, DBQ?
No, I've learned a lot about this game, and I so way to dive in, Prime. Nice
Yeah,
job.
that's why we have this talk this every week, right? Because now, I'm going to go download it and spend some time checking it out. So Speaking of Call of Duty, I didn't choose to execute the assignment exactly as it was written, just because I didn't really know of anything on the free to play market that I hadn't tried that I didn't like. Like I have a pretty robust list of I have like 8 different free to play games that I normally play all, as it is. So it just wasn't in a position to really step far and wide outside of the zone I was already in. So I spent some time playing Destiny 2, and even though it's not something that I've played for the first time, I at least considered the questions as they were written and how they might pertain. So, I have talked in recent past, and we talked last year as well. What the onboarding experience was like with Destiny 2 when it went free to play. So, in playing on Stadia, I had that exposure, right? Where, and it's a good thing too. Well, that experience was good because it's a tough question to answer. Somebody came by the other night while I was streaming it and asked, "Hey, if it's free, do you have access to this and that?" And I admitted, there were some elements of that I remembered, but for a person who had already bought into Destiny 2, it's hard to answer that question because you don't see it unless you're actually coming into it that way. So last year, I did have that opportunity to kind of go into the game from the position of, even though we got it free on Stadia if you were a pro level subscriber, you were still coming into the zone in that first light or whatever it was called kind of framework and structure. So you were exposed to like Destiny 1, like the first kind of quick set of missions, which it kind of hyper ran you through and shortened up. It was basically from the time you awaken up until you get the ship, I think. And then you're catapulted off to the Red War campaign for Destiny 2, I think it is. So so the onboarding, in my opinion, in Destiny 2 is fairly benign. I don't think there's really, because really you don't really start getting exposed to the do loop of, do you have to pay for anything, or are you gated away from things and from leveling, really until you chew through a ton of the free to play content that's there and complete a campaign or two, unless you're coming in and you're immediately trying to get with people who already own the game and you're trying to play catch up, right? And you're trying to get exotics and trying to get, like, you're gonna. So for that, I don't know if I would necessarily call it a paywall, but depending on how much time your compatriots are giving you to kind of catch up, yeah, you may hit a paywall and have to pay in some to accelerate, to get leveled up faster than the kind of native way that you normally would, just by virtue of completing campaigns. So that didn't impact me directly, because I'm a person who never minds going back and replaying those campaigns. Um, so onboarding to me was essentially fine. Um, now earlier this year, when we talk about things, and I didn't play it this time, but when we talk about things like playing World of Tanks and World of Warships, that depending, those systems scale, right? So I felt like onboarding on World of Warships was easier, and to me, the onboarding experience really depends on just how many systems there are. I mean, you can pretty much tell, right? When you go to the main UI in a free to play game, the more stuff there is on the screen, the harder it's going to be to onboard. Because that's just going to mean the more resources and whatnot you have to be concerned with, right? And then it's a matter of whether or not those resources that are presented on the screen really matter. So World of Tanks, for instance, is a much more difficult onboard to me than World of Warships was, because the UI is much more complex. There's many more like categories of things that you have to manage. You have to manage packs and suites of kind of equipment that each have their own subcomponents. So Destiny 2 to me is fairly benign from an onboarding perspective. And I mean, DBT, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really know that there's lots of different currencies, but the only ones that really matter are silver, and that only matters if you want to buy stuff, and bright dust, which again kind of only matters if you want to buy stuff to accelerate certain things. Um, Other than that, they only really matter for cosmetics, and again, that only matters but so much. So to me, you really only have to be concerned about the levels and layers of currency, like I said, if you're trying to play catch up with friends. So
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, right? There's not. Silver is there. You earn it by doing things. The paid currency really is just there for cosmetics, unless you're going to do a boost. I think the interesting question within the Destiny community over the last month or so has been is a lot of that free content is going to be vaulted. The Red War campaign, the 2 expansions from that first year, and so the question that people have been asking is whether or not you'll get Shadowkeep, which not Shadowkeep. What was the Forsaken, right?
Well, Forsaken starts in the whatever that
Yeah,
place is called, the lower
which
right
would
hand
be that
corner.
would be the next oldest story piece, and that was you and I ran some of that just this past
Right.
week, and I mean that would be a very fun and meaningful kind of free to play entry spot, but
Right.
there hasn't been any confirmation about what they'll provide or if they'll
That's the
do anything like they've done.
that's the Tangled Shore. Is Tangled Shore being vaulted? Because I didn't. It is. No. Okay. Right.
No, no, no. You've got Mars and Titan and Mercury, um, Io. So a lot of the ones from the Red War and the 2
right.
smaller expansions of that first year. So everything before Forsaken is being vaulted.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, and there hasn't really been any discussion of what's replacing it, right? I mean, everybody's been really wrapped around the axe about weapons, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's how many planets are going to be left and how are they going to
Yeah,
present those?
it's what's replacing it is a smaller amount of content, fewer strikes, um, some new areas, but we don't know how big those common areas will be.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I
we'll
guess
see.
I guess what's really to be seen is whether or not this is a hard swerve away from the story basis of Destiny, right? So, because you could just make, I mean, we were talking another podcast that I'm on. We were talking about Destiny and earlier this week and how there are kind of these 2 different Destinies, right? There's the one that where people go off and they sign up on Bungie.com and they read the grimoire and they know all of like the 99 different levels of lore, right? Then there are those of us who essentially play it like a big physics model in a big digital playground. And admittedly, I'm a little bit in between those because I do enjoy the mainline story, but like I'm not going off and digging into like the deepest, darkest kennels of all the lore. And every once in a while, right, you get forced to do that because in order to find a thing or to play through a thing or to understand a bounty, there's certain elements of that you have to force yourself to understand. So it just I like you said, I worry that vaulting all of those planets from what I think of as the more heavily story driven part of Destiny 2, that they're going to do is they're just going to replace it with a kind of a digital playground, and they're going to kind of have some World of Warcraft kind of quests, right? Because there are lots of quests in there that aren't necessarily full of like cinematic cutscenes and all that kind of stuff. And it just says, go to point A, go to point B, go to point C, do 10 of these things and 20 of these things and 15 of those things. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that evolves.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely don't think that they're shying away from story. The fact that they're
Okay.
bringing back characters from Destiny 1.
Right,
There's been
right.
some released Grimoire stuff already, or not, but not Grimoire, but lore pages that kind of lean back into some of the EXO development and some other pieces there. So
Okay.
we'll
Uh,
see.
and just since we're already 30 minutes in, I want to make sure I give time to DBQ. I'll just briefly cover Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone. So so again, not necessarily the first time that I played. It was the first time that I've played with another person, though. And so actually, Osiris Prime and I teamed up to play a little Warzone. Um, it still kind of hit me the same. It didn't really necessarily change. My problems with Warzone is it just feels like a really super long, and I have the same problem kind of with Apex Legends, where it's there's a looting loop and there's a combat loop, and you typically don't start hitting the combat loop until you get into the final vestiges of any given round. And so I feel like there's this incredibly long loot loop of you just running around to houses and gathering stuff. And in most cases, your frequency of encountering a combatant during that time period is fairly limited. And then when you do and you lose, then you get sent to the gulag, and that's cool. It keeps you in the game, But again, if a match is like 10 minutes, you can spend 7 minutes of it not fighting anyone. So there's that, and I struggle with that contention. It's a very neat social game because you have tons of time to really talk. So Osiris and Prime and I kind of caught up on everything and talked a lot about games and design and what we were up to and what we were playing. But in comparison to if we have time, we'll get to the fact that I was playing free for all and some of the other multiplayer modes within Call of Duty. It's not nearly as busy of a mode. So
I'm laughing at that because that's the part of the game that I enjoy, right? When I've played Warzone, I'm playing, the plunder mode where it really is trying to avoid combat, or it can be, right?
right,
Is the looting aspect is the win mechanic there, and so it's interesting how they have divvied that up and leaned in different directions there.
right. And Prime, were you saying when we were playing that Plunder is also one of your favorite modes?
No, I think I've only played that like once
Okay.
so far.
I was talking to somebody else. I guess. I was talking to one other person who mentioned that Plunder was one of their favorite modes, and I have not gotten around to playing that. But onboarding in Warzone is fine, and I think it pretty much plays. In Prime, you tell me if you differ. I think it pretty much plays like most kind of standard battle royales. Um, I will say that the layers and systems of currency and leveling didn't really hit me as a problem because the back end of it and how it impacts your modern warfare progression is the same as it is with any other multiplayer. You get unlocks and stuff, and you can unlock weapons and kits and whatnot. But most of the time in Warzone, you're not playing with your own weapons, so they're just things that you unlock and just worry about them later. And you don't really necessarily hit a paywall. But I will say probably the most interesting thing about Warzone is that it has an economic mechanics in the dynamic game, right? So you're focusing on currency and whatnot is not solely limited to your off battlefield time. You have to get your head wrapped around how you gain currency actively in a match and how that plays into things like being able to revive your teammate, being able to shop at these little kiosks that are spread throughout the map, and things like that. And I at first thought because one of the things like I've never gone into Counter Strike because I've always despised the mere thought of like you gaining currency and unlocking weapons and stuff in the middle of a number of matches, right? That's just always bothered me. Um, and so I thought that I would have that same kind of gut reaction to Warzone. But even since I tried it out the first time, I haven't for whatever reason. It actually feels pretty native and organic the way they've instantiated it in the game. It doesn't feel disruptive or out of place. So, and it's really neat how they've then taken that mechanic and actually spun other modes of Warzone into the game. Um, so, yeah, all good there, Activision. DBQ, you played this game called Black Desert. I think so. I feel like we all played like militaristic style shooters. That is not what Black Desert. Oh, Black Desert is actually medieval, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's a Korean MMO. So this is so when you said there's not a free to play game that I haven't tried yet, or that I like, it made me laugh because here's one that you haven't tried, and I'm pretty sure you wouldn't like it based on your MMO love or lack thereof. So Black Desert is a Korean MMO. It launched in 2015. Last year or so, it's been on consoles. It is crossplay on console, so you can play together. It is. I picked it up. It's on Game Pass, and actually with Xbox, Game Pass perks right now, or whatever it is, Xbox Live perks, you can get some additional in-game currency and a second character slot, which is good because characters are there's a ton of different classes, all have different weapon types, a primary and a secondary, but the classes are locked to gender. So, and the genders are really, really leaning into the jiggly physics model of uh, game design. So,
Dead or
you
Alive.
may, pardon,
It's like Dead or Alive.
maybe not quite that bad,
Oh,
but
okay.
like when yes, I mean, Genshin Impact is not absolved from this either. That just because you're breathing doesn't mean certain parts of your body need to move in rhythm. So, so there's that. But the combat, I think, is really the highlight of what I enjoyed from it. It's an MMO. It is all full of MMO trappings. You load into an entry zone where there's tons of other characters running around. You've got quests to pick up, but the combat is maybe not platinum-esque, but it's real time. You can put together combos. There's almost a Dead or Alive feel to it, and maybe not so much juggling depending on the types of weapons you have, but it is full-on action game combat, and so that makes it pretty enjoyable in terms of the actual gameplay. It is dense and layered with systems, and there are pets and mounts and cosmetics and tents, and you're also building up. You have kind of a land aspect to it, so there's multiple kind of gameplay systems in here, and of course you can buy progression accelerators in terms of speeding up your weapon progression or your character progression. Um, so there is some of that kind of, maybe not necessarily pay to win, but definitely pay to accelerate. It was Prime. You played way more of your game than I played of this, right? I cashed out after maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. One, on a big screen, the print is very tiny because it was originally designed as a PC game, right? And it hasn't necessarily been scaled to such, especially on a 4K TV. And the same time, this is the challenge with Game Pass, and the beauty of it as well is, like, if I wanted an action game with good action combat, I've got lots of other options that I can jump into. And so at a time when this launched in like 2015, when having a free to play game that is out there and available and has really good kind of single player combat to it, I could see where this would have had some hooks. But in this time period where there's uh, you know lots of other free to play, as you've all been talking about, of free to play action combat, whether this still holds up or not. But again, I met my requirement for the assignment, and we can move on since we've got plenty of other things to talk about. So
So I want to ask before we do. So what I had mentioned before was that there wasn't any free to play game out that I was aware of that I felt that I would be happy with, right? That I felt like any of the free to play things that I hadn't played, I felt like I was going to be doing a reach or a force, which sometimes that's appropriate. I just wasn't really up to it, in this time frame.
no,
Um,
right? I'm right there with you because I had to go back through and think, what haven't I tried that is in the wheelhouse of something that I would think I would enjoy. But
right. So what? I may have misheard what you were saying. So I thought you were saying you thought that I would enjoy this one, but what? No, you didn't think so. Okay, all right.
oh no, no,
Okay,
no, no, no. You would have bounced off this way faster than I did.
okay.
So
Yeah, because
yeah.
for whatever reason, I'm not a fan. I have dipped my toes in MMO-ish online type things. I really love Star Citizen, but bounced off of it. I fell in love with Eve Online. Um, but uh, but yeah, of the MMO stuff, I'm definitely more of the sci-fi vector. I haven't found any of the fantasy RPG like things to to meet with my tastes for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, setting wise, it is both a little medieval, but also kind of, uh, you Asian samurai aspects to it too, right? Like after coming off of something like uh, Ghost of Tsushima, there are lots of kind of within that kind of shogun samurai combat aspect there as well.
Yeah. Well, it would have been interesting if Swiss was here to see if he had played something similar and hear how he felt about it. So DBQ made an attempt to be a little bit medieval, but Prime is a little bit Nintendo. Prime, I don't dare I suggest that that something that I did triggered something within you, but did you pick up Super Mario Odyssey? Was this already in your playlist plan, or did something I mentioned about playing it recently trigger your rekindle your interest in it?
No, it was actually pretty funny because I started playing this and I just I think it was because I bought the 3D Mario All Stars, and I was like, you know what, I haven't even finished this one yet, so let me go back and finish Super Mario Odyssey, which is kind of weird because usually you go back, and for me usually I'll go back and finish the older ones, which I've beaten 64 and Sunshine. I actually never beat Galaxy yet, but I'll go back and do that. But I was like, I want to play this one because I have it on the Switch, so I started start playing it, and then I saw, I think it was like a Twitter post or something where you were playing Mario Odyssey. I was like, oh wow, that's strange. That's weird. That's really strange. They both started picking it up, playing it. No, like I said, for me, I just want to kind of go back to it and kind of finish that game up before I went back and played the older games again. Um, I've had, and I always love the Mario games. 3D or 2D, it doesn't matter. What version it is. I always just enjoy it. I always get that kind of that rush when I'm running around and doing the triple jumps and hearing him doing his goofy noises and stuff like that. So I think I'm maybe near the end of the story. I'm not really even sure because I can't remember where I left off initially, but I'm fighting those weird rabbit creature things again. So, and I'm pretty sure the one I just fought, I had fought before. So I don't know if they just repeat like a bunch of times or,
Yes,
or
they do. Yes, they do.
okay. Yeah. So the kind of taller, skinnier guy, I'm kind of fighting him again. So in this like snowy, like these weird, like Yeti type creatures, I guess what they're supposed to be, that kind of round body. So, um, and I'm on that level. Actually, I think I just got off that. Well, I can get off that level if I want to. I got enough of the stars or moons that I can go to the next level. But I think I'm going to stay on that one for a little bit and just kind of collect some more of the moons. So, but yeah, I just wanted to pick it up and play it again. What was this just in your rotation, or what made you jump back into it or jump into it? Because did you play it before? I don't think you played it before, did you?
Yeah, I played it before. It was one of those things
Okay.
that I'd intermittently, at some point maybe bounced off of, or and then it'd come back in again, and like didn't bounce off of it. Saw the enjoyability of it, but just I am not a platform guy. I am also I am a staunch non-puzzler type guy. Like I don't play puzzle type games. So I wouldn't play something like a Luminous or what was the thing that came out at the beginning of the 360 era, Geometry Wars.
Geometry
Um,
Wars, yeah.
yeah, so something like that. Just I do enjoy Tetris, but just the other games of that ilk, um, I just haven't really, don't and even on third person action adventure games, like I had mentioned recently, talking about Tomb Raider. One of my problems is I love Tomb Raider. I've always been a fan of Lara Croft. I'm not as big a fan of the trilogy reboot, just because there's so many times that they take control of the character away from you. But one of the things that I didn't like, particularly about that reboot, was I just felt like on some of those levels where you go in and you're like staring at what must be like some hidden Rimbaldi device and look at this thing, and you're just like, I know the developers are just playing ha ha ha, I've got a secret, right? Like there's just a certain level of irritation and annoyance with the way certain things are hidden, and it's not it doesn't feel intellectual. It feels like kind of like it feels like the first person shooter equivalent of cheating, right? Like I'm gonna make this level tougher just by making the enemies move like far faster than you could ever like contend with. So platformers are not an easy thing for me to stick with. And yeah, so this did pop up back up in my radar and went on my playlist, but it was also when you go to the big, all of your app screen on Nintendo Switch, the thing right next to it was Super NES Online. And that I don't think I'd ever played any of that. I played some of the NES stuff, but hadn't played any of the Super NES. And so I wanted to spend some time at least investigating that. Again, same thing, right? The Super Mario, whatever the box thing is that came out that I didn't want to buy because I'm just not into paying, Nintendo, the eighth time for something that they released 20 years ago. But that's and I didn't grow up with those games. I don't have that nostalgic hook to it. But I did want to check some of these games out. And as a kid, would always bounce off of something like a Super Mario World. But tried it out this time, and between going back and forth between Super Mario World and Super Mario Odyssey, I think I kind of started to get it right from a point of, no, this is actually enjoyable, and more so, I was also viewing it through the lens of, I think my kids would enjoy this, and so maybe, I'll just go ahead and start, allowing them to be introduced to that, uh, and so, um, in Super Mario World, I kind of started seeing a lot of the ingenious of level design. Had never really paid attention to the timer that's on Super Mario World levels. Finally started paying attention to that. So a lot of these little design hints and cues and other pieces of the game that I had historically always ignored. To me, it was just a board, right, in the classic arcade, sense of the term, that I would try to surmount. I started paying a little bit more attention to it, and in doing so, found it more enjoyable. So yeah, I actually had a good time, playing those games. And again, maybe that's probably the type of game that's the way for me to do it, is to, like, I can't stick with that game for 2 hours at a time or longer like I do for some of my other play sessions. And so it's a thing to treat like, all right, here's my quarter, let me play for like 15 minutes and then, shut it down and move over to some other app. But in a similar sense, me playing something that was kind of outside my comfort zone, Prime, I don't think that Farming Simulator would be in your comfort zone.
But it's in your son's though, isn't he still playing? Or
Yeah, he had started playing it a while ago. Excuse me. And kind of fell off of it. And I actually picked it up. I actually picked it up without even him asking about it at first. I had a few days off, and I was like, I played my, my usual, my Fortnite and Warzone and, all these other games, Rocket League. And then I was just like, I want to play something else. And I don't know why. That's where kind of Mario came into, Odyssey came into play too. But I was like, you know what? I started playing Farming Simulator, and for some reason, I couldn't wrap my head around it because I was trying to play it like a Mario game, or play it like, these other kind of games. It's you can't do that. It's not arcadey. It's not an arcade game. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna start over and just start from the beginning and start playing it. And it's kind of like a Minecraft, kind of a thing. You just kind of, a casual kind of a game. I could pick it up for, like half hour, an hour or so, and, just kind of, you know, farm basically is what I'm doing. There's like economics to it, and you got to watch your money, and you got to make sure you do all these different jobs. So I mean, you do have to pay attention to it, but it's just kind of a fun, relaxing game just to kind of get into. And then after I started playing it, and my son didn't even know I was playing. He wanted to start playing it again. So I actually bought. So I played Farming Simulators, which is I think 17, technically 17 on the Switch, but they just call it Farming Simulator, like Nintendo Switch Edition or something like that. So I was playing that at first, and then he started playing it a little bit, and he's like, "Hey, we should play together," because I think he saw some YouTube people playing it, and they were playing together. I think they're on the PC though. So I looked it up, and on an Xbox version on 19, you can actually play multiplayer together, and it has to be online, so there's no like couch co-op or anything. So since I have the two Xboxes, I bought it, and we've been playing pretty much the past like week or so together. So built our little farm, and actually the one cool thing on the Xbox version is they actually allow mods. So we've been downloading the different mods, and they're free, or for the most part they're free. I think there's a couple that I've seen so far that you actually had to buy, but it's actually kind of cool that they do that. So you get, like, they obviously have like all the current and modern tractors and trailers and trucks and stuff like that, but then you can like download all the old ones and all these other brands and stuff like that. So it's actually kind of cool. So you get different houses, and um, they even have like whole maps that you can load up and play into. So, which is actually kind of cool. I didn't think they would have like a whole like different map that you can get into, at least on the Xbox version. So that's kind of nice. So
It sounds like it has one of those dynamic elements that is true also of Eve Online. So in Eve Online, you find a lot of things written out on the internet that about, like, there's a certain way to play it, and it's all about being social, and you should join a larger corporation, and yada. And I'm like, I don't want to be bothered with you guys. I just want to go off to my dark corner of space, play the game, interact with trade, right, and like live out this movie script in my head, that really describes like a plain Jane galactic interferer who's just trying to make a living, right? And it sounds like Farming Simulator. And so one of the things that's been written about Eve that you'll find is the developers will tell you, there's no way to win Eve, right? It's all about picking what you want your experience to be and allowing yourself to enjoy that experience. And it sounds like Farming Simulator is maybe the same. That it's not the objective to win the game, but it's all about defining your farming experience.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, yeah, but and it's kind of nice because I kind I've sat there and cultivated and seeded a whole field, and they're not like when you start off, it's not like super huge field, so it didn't take me all that long, like maybe 10 minutes or something. And then I had I think 2 or 3 other fields I can do. I was like, all right, I can't do that again. I can't do the whole thing. I can't cultivate and seed and spray it down and do all this stuff. So you can actually hire people, and obviously that takes out of your money. But once again, that's another aspect. All right, maybe I'll start it halfway, and then boom, I'll hire somebody and let them finish it or something like that. So and I can go do something else. So it's kind of cool that you have that kind of freedom in the game. So it's kind of nice.
All right, man. Well, DBQ, you've been quiet this whole time. It looks like you took a turn through Game Pass to try to do some quick hits and see what was there of value. Did you find anything as you scratched beneath the surface this past week?
Yeah, I'll talk about some quick hits, and I loved your analogy of, with the SNES Online, the idea of the arcade aspect, like try a little bit, move on. And so I did some of that with Game Pass, but I kind of dove into, spent a little bit more time with probably 4 games there this past few weeks or so. One is Hotshot Racing. So Hotshot Racing by Sumo Digital. Sumo Digital did most recently the Sonic All-Star Racing, Sonic Transformed. Actually, it has the same announcer, but Sumo Digital's racing chops actually go back quite a way. They did some Outrun arcade editions on 360. They did an Outrun version for PlayStation 2 in the original Xbox. They've done ports of, Driver and a couple other racing games throughout the years. So they've got some good racing chops, and it is kind of a low poly uh, graphic kind of, that's the atmosphere, that's the kind of so it is. I'm trying to think of the word, but I'm totally spacing out about the word that I'm thinking about, like the visual aesthetic. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for, is the visual aesthetic. So it feels almost like in that like in the Sonic or the Sega Racing, Sega Rally kind of Daytona 500 mid 90s type of version here. But it's got drift, but it almost is like the DS version of Mario Kart in terms of snaking. Like you can move from one drift to another drift and do a couple drifts in a row to keep your speed and momentum going. Like doing one drift around a corner in a burnout style and coming out of it, you lose a lot of momentum. But if you can drift back and forth, you can maintain your momentum as you're kind of cutting through a line. So it's a very arcadey game, but there's a little bit of nuance there in terms of that drift mechanic. So that was pretty fun. Dove into Dark Crystal, the Resistance Tactics. So this is a tactics game. If you know, Final Fantasy Tactics, it feels kind of in that vein of even going back to Jeanne d'Arc on PSP, another tactics game. Where you've got the grid, the height, whether you're in the front or the side, makes a difference. But it all has the characters from the Netflix short series, limited series of the most recent Dark Crystal from last year. So it's got the same, a variety of classes, but the classes all kind of make sense within the Jim Henson Dark Crystal realm. It's a game that came out on Switch first, and then came out Switch and PC, and now is out on other things. But it's a good little strategy game. I'm gonna come back to it but it's one of those where, yeah, if I probably would play it on Switch, it's one of those where you could take with you, or if it would come to mobile, it would definitely feel worthwhile there. Eichenfell is another one. Eichenfell is it's got a 8-bit, 16-bit, probably 16-bit aesthetic, but it is kind of a cross between. My son described it as the combat is cross between Paper Mario and Fire Emblem. That you're moving along in a standard RPG type of world. You run into an enemy to get into a battle screen, and then you are lined up on either side. But when it's your turn, you have a movement range. So you move within the kind of linear map that you're on, and then you have different magic attacks, and your magic attacks have distance. So if you're close enough, you can do a ground flame piece, and if you're further away, you can do a fireball shot, but you have to be within certain distances. And so sometimes I found myself kind of running away in the playing field in order to heal and coming back, or trying to measure out that once I knew an enemy in their range, to try to measure out to stay outside of that. But then you have the kind of classic Mario RPG, Paper Mario timing aspect, where if you can block with the right button time, or when you attack, you can get a little button time to get some extra damage. So very charming, great music, a nice little. It was put out by Humble Bundle Games in a small studio. So Eichenfeld, a nice little kind of throwback RPG. And then finally, the Goose Game, or the Geese Game, because I played it with two-player co-op, now that they've added co-op. So my son and I sat down on the couch and on a Friday night had some laughs with the Geese Game as two-player co-op, and it is a whole lot more fun with two players, because you end up kind of strategizing differently. Like you can distract one of the humans and do different things, or we ended up passing things around, and it became a much more cooperative and kind of strategic game, and not just simply kind of the puzzle game that it is. All
Yeah, I played
right.
a little bit of the Hotshot Racing.
No, you did. How did you like it?
Yeah, I mean, it
It's
was all right.
weird, isn't it? It isn't.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like I wanted it to feel. Like it took me a while to get used to it, and then even then, it wasn't what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I guess I've kind of gone past just kind of regular racing. Like I always need something like I need some kind of like power ups and stuff when I'm doing a racing game nowadays, uh, or just something different in it. Like even like Wreckfest, like you can like deform the cars and stuff like that, and make people crash and like flip over the railings and stuff. But this was just kind of like a straight up racing game. So I was like, okay, I mean, it's fun. It was fine. Like it played well, but and yeah, you're right. It's Daytona 500. And I got that feel from it just by graphics and stuff like that. So, but it was fine. I think.
Yeah, I've kept it installed. It's something where like the equivalent of, I've got 50 cents. I'll put in a game, do a race, come back to it another week, do another race. It's not something where I'm sitting investing time into.
Yeah, and there like any kind of like I don't want to say story mode, but like a championship mode or anything like that? Because I think I just did like exhibition races.
Yeah, there's a career kind of. I mean, it's
Okay.
basically like a circuit, right? It's very much in that mid '90s, like here are 4 races put together, and can you win the gold trophy type of thing.
Okay.
50 cents, man. What are you playing? What was that? What was that Dragon game with Dirk? The whatever
Dragon's
Oh
Lair.
yeah, yeah,
Dragon's
Dragon's
Lair.
Lair.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. I mean,
that was only
by
the
the
Like
first
time
Valorant.
you
50.
get to the mid '90s, I guess you're putting in more than just a quarter to play Daytona 500.
Yeah.
So
No. I was thinking about that tilt in the timeline where yeah everything was 25 cents, but then they would come in with these up games that would be 50 cents, like Dragon's Lair. So we're getting a little tight on time, which is fine. We've had a good conversation tonight, so I want to kind of skinny down these interim things and make them quick hits, but mainly focus on new games. Anything from a new game perspective, or things we haven't talked about that are important to bring up on Construction Simulator, Prime?
No, I mean that's pretty much it's it's the same like farming simulator. You're just in charge of you're the guy that starts up this construction site or a construction company, and you're just going around this like fictional town, just doing odd jobs and stuff. So pretty much in the same vein as farming simulator. Different studio or developer that did this one than farming simulator, but it's fun, just kind of like cool, you know,
So
sit
this
back and do stuff.
so this is not it's like I thought there was a game. There was a game that took the mobile game Bridge Constructor and like combined it with a regular.
are you thinking of the Portal Bridge Constructor one?
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. Yeah.
No, this is some. This is just like a straight up simulator, like
Okay.
farming simulator.
And it is
Yeah.
and it is not based on the mobile game Bridge Constructor.
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
something different.
Nope. I was just curious if this was another thing in the same ilk. I will cede my time on Super Mario Odyssey since Prime already commented on it, and I don't think I have that much anything particularly unique to bring up about that. Like I said, I went back to the game, and I think I started to kind of get it, and after being stuck on a certain level for a long time, I finally started catching on to the paradigm by which I needed to progress. DBQ, I mainly wanted to kind of get a report from you about Marvel's Avengers, but if you got anything of a quick hit nature that you want to cover before you get to that,
No,
certainly
we
tee
can
that
hit.
up.
I can save all kinds of other stuff. So let's talk about Marvel's Avengers. And what I will say is, when this game goes on sale over the holiday, it is easily worth the $30 that you'll be able to pick it up for. Right? I have sunk a bunch of time. I came back to it finally after kind of poking around at some other stuff. Came back to the campaign. The campaign is just fun. If you are a superhero fan of any whether you're DC or Marvel or any others, right? Like comics, movies, cartoons, it is a fun kind of power fantasy of a superhero within the campaign. The live service game stuff, the multiple hubs and currencies and faction reps and daily bounties and all kinds of other stuff, it deserves the flack that it's getting within the gaming press at this point. It
So,
is that part is the weakest piece of this game.
so talk to me a little, because this is the thing that I always felt wonky about this game. That I didn't buy the marketing of it being a living service. Part of that is just with the way I consume licensed properties. Like I have no interest in being Tony Stark, like a variant of Tony Stark, right? Like if I'm going to be a superhero, let me roll my own, right, and live that life, like more of like a champions or heroes for
City of
hire
Heroes,
or
yeah.
villains and vigilantes or something like that.
Mhm.
So talk to us, please, about what is broken, what is not working, what is it that they're doing about that living a variant of a licensed property as a service in a game that is also not hooking other players.
That's a tough question, and I am not. I wouldn't say that I am invested enough to be able to answer that in a really meaningful way, but I can give you my take on it.
Yeah,
So I have
I don't mean take the what I note as the deficiency and explain that. What I mean is just what about it is deficient about this whole
sure.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about the live service piece of this. So I think the two kind of struggles that it has, and they're both kind of damning for it, is that if you are not at endgame, there's a lot of clutter. You're running the same type of missions again and again. There's only a few missions that give you heavy enough, high enough gear. The drop rates in those hive, uh, in those hive chambers or towers, whatever they're called, is not significant. The most it's not consistent. Um, we've had some patches that have addressed that have increased that. Sometimes the not sometimes, but the rarity of the item you'll get after finishing some things. Also depends on the star rating that you'll get. And so if you're in a match made area and somebody drops out or somebody's server connection crashes, you're going to end up with a lower star rating, which means that you didn't necessarily get the gear. The benefit of Destiny's system of when it says here is a powerful gear, you'll earn a powerful gear emblem if you do XYZ. Do three of these, right? Like when we ran three gambits because we knew we would get something that was at our level. That's not the transparency that Avengers has at this point. So in that climb, you're limited in terms of what's going to get you there, and the other stuff you've already kind of burned through, and it's still, I mean, the challenge there is the stuff that's not in the campaign story missions is still really kind of cut and pasty, in terms of not only enemies but landscapes. So if you're past that climb and you're kind of at endgame, there's not a whole lot yet right now that is out there for endgame players. And now with the delayed additional content, that doesn't help the matter either. And so I think that that's where the challenge is for people who may want to try to get to endgame, there's not a good path to get there. And the people that are there there's nothing left for them to do. And so it is facing the same live service challenge that Anthem has hit, that the Division hit in multiple different ways, that Destiny has hit and pushed through. But and this is the combination, right? They had a developer blog out last week when they delayed, or 2 weeks ago when they delayed the Kate Bishop Hawkeye content and story pieces. And yes, it's COVID, but also, they have developers in California who have left their homes for wildfires. And so there's a lot of kind of displacement. So there's a lot of disruption in their development cycle, but if that was simply just patching and doing bug fixes for a single player game, that'd be a whole lot easier to manage than it would be to try to support what they were either they had intended to do or they were tasked to do by a publisher, is to put together a living live service type of game.
Yeah, keep that in mind when you play some of those games later this year. Yeah, so this is, I mean, what this brings up is like one of my things of like you can't, and I mean I've talked about like how things were when I was going through school recently, and I was like, yeah, I just hit this point where like when I game, what I get out of that session, that 1 hour, that 2 hours, that can't be there can't be any uncertainty in that. There can't be like some of these games we go at, like these third person action adventure games in particular for me, like, and it's a question whether or not you're going to enjoy that next 2 hours, right? I play something like The Last of Us Part 2. Like, that's not something I could probably play when I was in school because, like, whether I enjoyed a given 2 hour segment was highly questionable. And so, I devolved to playing a lot of mobile games. I devolved to playing a lot of racing games, right? Because I know, give me a racing game, it's reviewed fairly well and accepted. I know that I'm going to get a chance to run 10, 12, 15 different races. I'm going to get some car unlocks, but I'm probably going to have a good time, right? There's no question about that. And so to me, like what you just mentioned, like that, like you can't, in terms of design, like you can't have a multiplayer service level post end game kind of event, task, quest, and have that be a question mark and have that have external dependencies, right? That's one of the things that I've, when we talk about a lot of these broken mission things that I'm on a crusade about this year with games, is like a lot of those are because the mission structure has a dependency and there's a way to get to it and get those things out of sequence, and so that prevents you from completing the mission. And in this way, it's the same thing in terms of design. There's a dependency on other players or another piece of the dynamic or something that you don't have control over, and that can impact your experience. And I'm like, and you asked me to pay $60 for that, so yeah. I mean that's largely problematic. I can't
I
even
think for the
imagine.
sake of transparency here, that piece came from came from Paul Tassi over at Forbes in terms of the community, reading Reddit and reading other people who were playing this as well, trying to get a sense of the larger community of this. That was one of his comments in terms of some of that. I think from my perspective, the challenge here is, it's a great single player game. It's really fun. It's really enjoyable. There are some interesting story beats afterward. That each of the main heroes has kind of a sequence of missions that tell a little side story, but those missions scale up, and so to finish it, you got to be pretty high end in terms of gear into like the 40s or 40-ish. But again, that gets back to the challenge of leveling up and the grind aspect of that. So for me, I've made peace with the fact that this is not going to be a live service game that I'm going to engage with. I'm going to play the story and enjoy that as a as its own separate kind of standalone entity.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. Good, very good report, and glad to hear about that because as you look at the review scores for this thing, you're like, what in the world, And I mean that it's, to me, it's like Full Metal Jacket, right? Full Metal Jacket to me is a incredibly great movie as long as they're on Paris Island, right? And then the moment they leave, I'm like, I don't want to watch the rest of this. So, um, but there you have it. So I want to talk a little bit about Mafia Definitive Edition, which is one of the new games that I've played. I played the original game back in 2002, I think it was, when it released by Gathering of Developers, was the original developer. I think originally published by THQ. Um, but this time, that IP apparently has been acquired by 2K. It may have been one of the things that they picked up picked up in the great fragmentation THQ sale when they went bankrupt. I'm not sure. No,
They owned 2K did Mafia 3, so at some point in time they might have
they
picked
picked
up the
up the IP.
license.
Okay, all right. But I've always had a warm relationship with this IP. I played it on PC when it first came out. I didn't play Mafia 2 or get around to Mafia 3, but I always found them a little. They're very similar in ethos to Max Payne to a certain extent, just in terms of it's kind of that grimy kind of very earthy kind of a tale of a it's not superheroes, it's not lasers, it's not all this kind of fantastical stuff that I might normally play. That's not grounded. There are tales that are grounded relatively in reality, and so I enjoyed Mafia when I played it originally. The big sad thing about it is back in that time, in the early 2000s, you would, I would go to EB Games or KB Toys um, or I guess Babbage's was probably gone by then, but wherever, I would go and I would, look for a couple video games on PC to pick up per month, and the shelves were always stocked. There was always like a new, dozens of new games that were of high quality and good value, and you could never, like, it's to me what console gaming has become since like the console generation 7, right? um and so not a lot of people, Mafia kind of escaped people's radar, right? And it went kind of unnoticed, and not a lot of people picked it up. So I've been really happy to see it come back in this time frame when it's relatively quiet, just because we're waiting on the new consoles to arrive. There's nothing new. I should say there's nothing new. There's no zeitgeist level kind of game coming out for the old consoles until the big holiday rush comes, and we've sadly most of the staples that would have normally been hyped at this time of year, like Madden and FIFA, have apparently not done so well. So it's a fairly good window to have just by chance have released a game that is a heavy, a third person action adventure, heavy story driven game. This is not open world, and so you can kind of see when you look at things that were built later, like a lot of the Sony games, I would say, that are third person action adventure, not open world, but not entirely linear. You can see a lot of those bones in that DNA kind of built in something that's Mafia Definitive Edition. Other than that, it's just been, so there's that nostalgic piece to it, but it's also just the game looks great. For the graphical enhancements that they've done, I'm pretty sure. I think that they've added new dialogue and recorded new dialogue to it. You can catch a couple points in the story where it you can hear the voice track for a particular character change a little bit, and so I think that that's newly recorded dialogue. There are things that have been inserted that, like, I don't recall, like story beats that I'm like, wait, hold on a second, I don't remember that from when I played it. Now, granted, it's been 17 years, so I'm not saying by any means I verbatim have the dialogue memorized like I used to with Aliens. But anyway, I did, but I believe that they really strongly believe that there are indicators that they've gone back and recorded new dialogue. It's got a couple glitches in it. Like I saw one, I had one where like a character was talking to me who just didn't render on screen at all, and I'm like, wait, is he underneath the car working on it or something? Like I just don't see him, and then I saw a floating key just hanging out in space. I'm like, oh, I guess that's where he's supposed to be, but that character rendered in a later cutscene, and I was able to, and I, saw what he looked like. So, what's also remarkable to this game is in something where I feel like, look, The Last of Us Part 2 is a creative and technical marvel in what they did. It crosses my personal taste and threshold for how frequently cutscenes happen and how long they are. It just, from a pacing perspective, it just crossed that line for me, and it also was hugely pretentious in the interrelationships. And again, I have zero problem whatsoever with the social, if they were trying to advance a social agenda of normalization of certain archetypes, I have zero problem with that at all. It was not a thing for me. Didn't pick up on it. That doesn't bug me at all. That being said, the story of The Last of Us Part 2 is heavily rooted in this notion of a love triangle, quadrangle, polygon. Like, it's just, everything was about romance, and to the point where the interpersonal relationships between the characters just drag the story down to a point where, again, if it hits your wheelhouse and that's what you wanted, it's great. If it kind of crossed that line, and I'm a kind of soft story guy, where like something like a Destiny 2 fully meets my satisfaction and need, where there's enough story window dressing there. There's also enough creative space for you to kind of imagine your own script in that story, and it only goes so far. The well is only but so deep. So, whereas like The Witcher 3 starts to kind of get to the point where it kind of starts to cross my boundary of like how much, dripping, story elements I want in it. So this one is just like, is right where I want it to be, right? The pacing of the story, the frequency of the cutscenes, and how long the cutscenes are. The cutscenes are kept fairly short, in my opinion. They convey a good, meaty, like, vignette of like who the characters are and their interpersonal relations. Again, not super complex, right? Like not 99 different directions and points of depth like The Last of Us Part 2 is. But I appreciated that difference, particularly having recently played, right, The Last of Us Part 2, and then turning around and playing this game. So the other thing I like about this game is there's a lot like it's kind of built like a GTA like, but doesn't take it that far. But I just really appreciate the fact that there's like a lot of different, like each mission is different, right? There's hand-to-hand combat missions, then there's punching missions, then there's stealth missions, then there's a racing mission, then there's a driving. It's like, right, so those drum beats change each time. But again, not in an annoying way. Some games shift that on you, and it's really fast and staccato and disruptive and really full of friction, and it frustrates you. But they don't really do that to you in this game. And it's just a good mob movie, right? So, in a world where we haven't had a lot of those recently, it's good from that perspective. So,
Does the pacing of it? I mean, as you're talking about kind of the different modes of gameplay, does the pacing feel? I mean, has it aged well? And in those different modes, is it? I mean, because this came out originally, what, San Andreas time? I mean, this was Mafia 1 would have
was it
been,
San
it was,
Andreas or was it
might have been 4?
between Vice City and San Andreas?
Well, I mean, again, it was
I don't know.
before, either
San,
way, it was before
San Andreas
GTA
was
4, right?
Gen 7, right?
Yeah.
Was Xbox 360 PS3. Yeah, so this was, I believe this
Which
came
one?
out.
San Andreas? No, San Andreas was PlayStation 2,
Okay. All right.
original Xbox. Then
Okay.
in 2008, you would have had GTA 4.
Right, yeah.
This came out in 2002.
Yeah, I
The
think so.
original one.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just looked it
Really?
up. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what I guess my question is this is a open world gameplay has evolved
Yeah.
or just changed,
Right.
and from the way you're describing it, like it's actually held up okay, and the fact that it's a little simpler and not just a Ubisoft map of icons feels maybe a little more rewarding that way.
Yeah, when you go back to the Sony discussions, right, to the Naughty Dog discussions and the Sucker Punch discussions, right, of like why their games aren't open world, and you get to where Neil Druckmann and Cory Barlog talk about, hey, look, when it's open world, it's really difficult to tell like a tight, like narrative driven experience because you lose so much control and you give so much of it up to the player. And I get that. So in that vein, I feel like this game is that, like, in a world, in a time where, look, I love my Ubisoft stuff, right? Like my super open world games, my map full of icons, and I get to choose your own adventure, right, and pick how I want to go around the map. But the problem is that when, well, there's two. I guess there's two things. And maybe it's not. Maybe only one of them is associated with open world. So one part of them is that as games get bigger and as people want more, and as you constantly raise the bar over what was done last, and I think that's what The Last of Us Part 2's problem is. It's this effort to Death Stranding, right? It's this effort to exceed to a certain extent, right? Some of the story-driven things that kind of came before, and you get to where movies got for a while. I think we've just kind of normalized it. We're like, the mark of a good movie was whether or not it was 2.5 hours long, right? And it was longer than, right? Is it longer than Titanic? Okay, well then it's got to be okay, right? I mean, the Marvel movie struggled with this, and I'm like, and we just, from a cinematic perspective, we just want to get back to tighter stories. Like the 1 hour 45-minute movie is okay. The 1 hour 40-minute movie is okay, and so in terms of like where those scripts have just kind of gotten loose and all over the place. And again, I go back to The Last of Us Part 2, and I'm like, there's just a lot of story elements that I'm just like, can we just put that in DLC? Like, I don't need that, right? And so from that perspective, I feel like this game like scoops that up and tightens it all back up and kind of brings it back, to a more linear type story where there are some decent branches in exploring some subplots and side characters, but it just doesn't go into that deeper well that something like The Witcher does, or some of these other things kind of do. And so in that aspect, it's kind of a throwback kind of game. It's so unfortunate.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of dialogue now about like wanting to get back to like the AAA game and shorter games. There's a big request out in the gamer community for getting back to like the 15 to 22 hour kind of experience. And yeah, I think this is kind of it. I think this game, I want to say this game is like a 10-hour game, I think. And I'm pretty sure, the whole trilogy is probably no more than like, it's not as short as Max Payne, which is more of like an 8-hour experience. I think this game is probably I think the first one is a 15-hour game, and I'm pretty sure the other ones are right around there or maybe shorter. So and then you look at the Halo franchise and roughly how long each of those games are. So yeah, I think that fit is definitely kind of more in my bailiwick. So, Prime, do you want to take us out and talk a little bit about Super Mario 35? Because that is one of the newer games. I know we're going long, but I don't want to bypass that particular nugget before we get out of here.
I'll be pretty quick. Yeah, I played I don't know, probably at least 10 to 12 games in Super Mario 35. This is the old school, NES Mario Battle Royale game that recently came out. I think that's gone after March, right? I believe. I I got to second a couple times. I haven't got first yet, which is kind of make me angry, a little bit angry. But yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, you're just going through the old school Mario levels with 35 other people or 34 other people. As they go through and kill people, and I don't know if when they get coins too, but it throws more enemies onto your screen. So it kind of gets harder like that. If you can get like a star or even just a fire flower, I mean, you're pretty well set off. You can just shoot the enemies down before they even come near you. So and that way it gets a little easy, but then it gets like they start throwing like the old school Bowser at you, and he's throwing fire. So if you don't have like the fire flower or the star, you're pretty much screwed unless you can like jump over him somehow or get around him without getting hit, because obviously you're going to get shrunken like you used to in the old game. So, but yeah, I've been having like a good amount of fun with it so far. I want to get back into it so I can get that first win, because it's kind of, I've seen Swiss, he's gotten a couple wins I think, and DB, I don't know if you got any wins in it yet. I know your family did, but
No, yeah, I have not. No. Nope. I mean, I'm still poking around at it, but yeah, no. I'm happy to live vicariously through my kids who did win.
That's what I was going to say. You're the progenitor of them, so go ahead and claim their victory as your own.
If they win, you win.
But yeah, I agree, right? It really does. It comes down to having a fire flower and just sending as much garbage enemies over as you can and trying to survive, right? This is when we talked about it before, the idea of potentially having different modes or limited time events where there's different win conditions, because there are some design limitations at least in the current kind of. If there is a meta for Mario 35, then that is generally it.
So is this a game that you need to claim before March, or does it completely go away from any and all access in March?
Servers go down.
Okay. All right.
At least that's where they're at right now, right?
Right.
Like
That's what they claim. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
That's different from the 3D World or 3D All Stars, which you can't buy, but if you have it, you'll still, you can still play it.
Okay. All right. Makes me think about the fact that getting turned off by all the pre-order madness, I now realize that it opens up the possibility of picking up a new model of the Switch next year, which I hadn't really considered up until this point. But thinking about that Super Mario World, Super Mario Odyssey experience, it makes me think about picking up the new model and then taking the OG and putting that upstairs and letting the kids play that. So it's an interesting option.
Good idea.
I hadn't considered it.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about the next PickZ PlayZ. So this is going to be a little long and winded. It's a slightly difficult assignment to get through, so just hold on. Stick with it. Phil Spencer was recently interviewed by Kotaku. In the interview beginnings, he mentioned that over the long haul, he expects the Xbox Series S will be the bigger seller in comparison to the X. That price will carry it to higher demand over the performance of the Xbox Series X. So this fortnight's assignment is a bit challenging. As best as you can, simulate the experience delta between the Series X and the Series S and report back on how much that delta mattered. Right? So the point of this is that a lot of times, and Prime, I'm looking at you, right? I think all of us have said it. Maybe I haven't said it because I love my hardware, but all of us have at some point, all of us have talked about, whether or not higher spec hardware really matters, right? We all have, even I have, a threshold point of cutoff, right? I'm not one of these PC gamers who goes, well, you have to have a 2080 Ti, and anything less than that is a compromise, right? So the point of this is to isolate yourself and spend some time really focusing on whether or not the performance spec delta and the differences in hardware really feed into your gaming experience at all. So are more pertinently than we say that it does. So try if you can to play the same game on hardware sets that have a significant performance delta. If you can't play the same game, try games in the same genre or that have similar design aesthetics and mechanics. You can synthetically go at this on PC by differentiating the settings between high and low end if you don't have differentiated hardware, or playing on PCs with different GPUs. So if you have like a gaming box and then like a everyday kind of box or like a salvage box or an older set of hardware that you let the kids play on, you can do that. You can play Crash Bandicoot on an Xbox X or PS4 Pro, then Super Mario on the Switch, right, if you need to do that. Prime, you can play same game on your One X and your S, and somebody can play a game on PS4 Pro versus a regular PS4. Destiny 2 on the PC versus Destiny 2 on the Xbox or PlayStation. Do specs matter in the experience? If not at the game mechanic level, how about the quality of life level? So things like faster load times, or as DBQ mentioned, right, when the text is rendered differently, like when you don't have to squint at the screen because the hardware set that you're playing on renders it at a better resolution. As always, feel free to meet the spirit of the intent of the assignment, if not the letter of the law. So I'm going to try and do this by playing the Division 2. And of course, it may vary because I say one thing one week and then if what's on my playlist changes, I adjust. But for the sake of argument, I'm looking at playing the Division 2 and playing that on two different sets of GPUs. So I've got a box with GTX 10 series on it, and then I've got a box with the GTS 20 series card in it. And so, I'm going to look at, how those play differently and whether it matters or not. DBQ is going to look at PS4 with 1080. Okay, so he's going to play on the PS4 and then leave it in the 1080p performance mode or 4K resolution mode. And then.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I was thinking of doing it on two different TVs.
Okay.
Try it, performance or resolution. But I'm also reading back and trying to get the assignment here. I may end up with an Xbox game or a Game Pass game and playing it on a 4K TV on a 1080 and on my PC as well, and kind of
Okay.
playing with those specs and having that comparison.
I mean, because you could just do it with boost mode on and off, right?
Yeah, I mean, the difference would be is like if I if I'm playing it on PS4 Pro on resolution mode on a 4K, it's going to push it as much as I can. Where if it's only trying to put out in 1080p, even if I'm on resolution mode, I'm still going to get a better performance. So
Okay.
I'd want to use different hardware to that capacity of using TV hardware there to make the difference.
Gotcha. Prime is going after Doom Eternal on the Xbox One S and the Xbox One X. I definitely want to hear about that. I'm hoping I had got to look at the schedule. I can't remember who's back on after this, but I know Swiss surprisingly asked about Doom Eternal in the Discord chat today, which I didn't think that Doom Eternal would be his kind of game. But yes, that's a very good game in terms of all the graphic avarice that it throws on to the screen with all the luscious details and whatnot. And so yeah, it'll be very good to look at how that game plays and how it makes you feel playing it on those two differentiated sets of hardware, particularly in a world where with the Series S and the Series X, one of them targets 4K performance, one of them targets 1440p performance, and I know on PC, 1440p is where I've settled out. Is the sweet spot of gaming. Like 4K is overly for me, and invokes too much of what I don't need. So interesting assignment. We'll see how everyone does with it. We'll see what kind of reports out we get on it. Next week is a deep dive hosted by Swiss with DBQ as co-host. So I hope that's accurate. I hope I actually revised that. It's not a copy paste from the last time.
I checked it before.
Okay, all right. So it's accurate. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So the new
and actually, it's you and I on the next GX show. So just so you know.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have ample time to gather some thoughts from DBQ and Swiss in the chat, and of course, they can always choose to attend of their own volition. Although I know that's fraught with risk given how long we've gone tonight. Anything else anybody wants to add before we get out of here?
No, lots of good games to talk about, even as we're winding down in generation, but also ramping up into the holiday season. So.
Yeah. Such
quick question for DB on the Avengers, real quick. I guess because you had mentioned how you didn't want to be like another Tony Stark clone, with everybody else. So when you're playing that, like, is it just just Iron Man? If so, say you pick Iron Man, is it just Iron Man, a bunch of Iron Mans running around if you're playing with other people?
So when you go to do a mission, there can't be duplicates of the characters. So
okay.
you either match in with other people playing other characters, and the challenge there is that if the player base isn't great, you could be loading for a while. But you can always turn off auto matchmaking, and that's what I've been doing. If you turn off auto matchmaking, it just loads in, and you have 2 or 3 AI characters playing along with you as the other ones. So, and that's actually beneficial. There's still some limitations there, but it is, if you could play a Strike in Destiny and have 2 AI characters, like in a Halo Strike team, like maybe that would be interesting. And actually, this works pretty well. It's one of the aspects of this gameplay design that Crystal Dynamics did well, is kind of build that in so that people can experience everything as a single player if they wanted to.
But what it kind of requires upon you is that is that you need to play the game of somehow advancing all of the characters that are part of that repertoire, right? Like you may have a level 29 Thor, right? But your Captain America you need to spend some time on your Captain America for when you get thrown into a match where you're not able to select the character that you might normally want.
Well, and this is where some of the matchmaking is not that forgiving either. Like you're choosing your character before you choose your mission, right? Like in some ways, if you could choose your mission and then get to kind of the standard kind of MOBA character select screen, and everybody could pick and choose, then that would actually be beneficial. And yeah, then you would have to, or they'd have to do some type of auto scaling. Here, you're taking a character, then choosing a mission, which already bottlenecks kind of the number of potential players you have.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yes, in terms of the actual like story campaign, Prime, you are jumping between some characters. That's all dependent on the beats of the story. And then as you go into kind of the The side missions is when you can choose different characters.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us, folks. Thanks so much for joining in. Once again, my name has been Gascally Stamus from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, aka Game Logic on Twitch. On behalf of myself, the E2KG Network, DBQ Hams, and Osiris Prime, that's going to do it for us. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like and stream the games that you love. We'll be back next week to do it again. Until next time, good night.
My young love said to me, my mother won't mind, and my father won't spite you for your lack of